During the affectionate review of the wedding, my husband took only one look. His eyes turned red, and he picked up a stool and smashed the screen. I laughed so hard that tears streamed down my face on the wedding stage. I played the video. I have been waiting for this moment for a long time. Miss Cindy Nelson and Mr. Henry Lewis love each other very much. Let's take a look at the little details of their love. The MC spoke slowly and Henry held my hand tightly. His handsome eyes were full of anticipation, and his usually serious face now raised his eyebrows and smiled ostentatiously. He whispered in my ear, "Cindy, we have good memories together too."
Good memories?
Does it mean Henry held my head in the tank for 5 minutes, or locked me in a cage? After Henry fell in love with me, he would destroy the family of anyone who saw my performance. He said that with him around, no one in the whole Chongqing would dare to say anything bad about me. I glanced at the celebrities and wealthy people who came to attend the event. Everyone had a blessing smile on their face, but there was a glimpse of sarcasm in their eyes. How ridiculous! Henry, a young master from Chongqing, married a toy that was once locked in a cage and laughed at by others. As the music of love story slowly sounded, Henry raised his head and looked at the screen expectantly. Noisy electronic music started playing. It was supposed to be Henry and my wedding photos, but it was replaced by a video of me being assaulted. In the video, my voice became hoarse from crying. The picture is clear and the sound is loud, all thanks to Henry. He recorded this video himself. As soon as the video came out, Henry's eyes turned red instantly and he looked like a mad beast. Henry picked up a stool and smashed it against the big screen. He was like a madman, smashing the screen to pieces over and over again. I stood on the stage, laughing until tears came down my face. I said, "Happy wedding, Henry. This is my wedding gift to you. Do you like it?" I held my belly and almost laughed until my stomach hurt. No one in the audience dared to whisper. Everyone in the wealthy circle of Chongqing knows how dirty and despicable I am. No one dared to laugh at me. Henry is making it up to me, but I'll never forget it. On my 22nd birthday, the cage curtain was opened and I stayed in the cage and starved for 3 days. They threw me a live chicken. They laughed so loudly then, but now? Why don't they laugh anymore? I have never been a good student since I was young and I was rather stupid. In the year of the college entrance examination, I was admitted to a junior college, while my younger sister was admitted to a key university. Unfortunately, my father was killed in a motorcycle accident while riding with my mother. I patted my head and said to my sister, "Sister, go to college. I will support you." My sister cried and said she wanted to work in the factory with me, and I scolded her harshly. I still remember that summer, in the rental house, my sister swore to me that she would make a name for herself and live up to my efforts. My sister needs 3,000 yuan for tuition and 1,000 yuan for living expenses to go to college. I went to work and did all kinds of jobs. At first I had no experience and all I knew was to serve dishes and wash dishes. I don't earn much, so I live frugally and save the money for my sister. In fact, eating instant noodles does not save money. Do you know what saves the most money? I just eat instant noodles. I can eat 7 yuan worth of instant noodles for a week. I put some vinegar in the noodles and was enjoying them when my sister called me and asked, "Sister, what are you eating?" I put the video close to my face and smiled. "I'm eating Wallace, the burgers are delicious, you should buy a few and try them too." 3 Wallace burgers for $10 was a luxury for my sister and me. When I graduated from high school, I stood at the entrance of Wallace and walked around the door 3 times, but I couldn't bear to buy her anything. My sister is very hardworking and she studies very hard in college. One time I went to see her at school with bags of snacks. She was drinking free soup in the cafeteria, breaking the steamed buns into small pieces and soaking them in the soup. Tears started to flow and I walked over and ordered a chicken chop rice for her. My sister insisted that she couldn't finish the $12 chicken chop rice. How could I not eat it? The chicken chop was not even as big as her palm, so we each took a bite and shared it. Later I thought, I can't do this, I'm earning too little. I have no education, so I thought about delivering food. Although it is hard and tiring, I can earn more money. I earned more, but something happened to my sister. It was raining that day, and more people order takeout on rainy days. When I was riding my yellow scooter around the streets, my counselor called me. "Are you Kathleen Baker's sister?" Kathleen got into a fight with a classmate. I couldn't believe that my sister was fighting. My sister is such an honest person. You can't do anything wrong if you hit her with a stick. When she was a child, a boy sitting behind her used a lighter to burn her hair. But she didn't dare tell the teacher. I quickly rode my motorcycle to my sister's school. The rain was so heavy that the motorcycle slipped and I fell, bruising my knee. I was anxious and didn't care. I just picked up the motorcycle and rushed forward. When I got to school, I saw my sister standing in the corner of the counselor's office. She bit her lip without shedding tears and silently looked at the 3 girls in front of the counselor. Those 3 girls were all dressed nicely and looked like city kids. They all told the counselor about their sister's crimes. She never goes to dormitory gatherings. She is very withdrawn. When we talk to her, she seems to ignore us. When we ask her what celebrity she likes, she won't say anything. We have to get up at 7 a.m., which really affects our rest. We wanted to pool our money together to buy an air conditioner, but she said she didn't have the money. Is there anyone who can't come up with a few $100s? The counselor was a young man, and he couldn't handle so many female students. He adjusted his glasses and stammered, "Then you can't lock Kathleen out of the dormitory all night." Locked my sister outside the dormitory for a night? I immediately grasped the point and looked at the 3 gorgeous girls. The girl in the lead had pink nails with little white bears on them. She blinked and muttered. We were all asleep. Who heard her knocking on the door? My sister was standing in the corner. When she saw me coming, tears started to fall from her eyes. My sister has been like this since she was a child. She doesn't feel wrong because no one supports her. Only when she saw her sister who doted on her did her grievances suddenly come to her mind. With red eyes, she said, "I'm sorry, sister, I caused you trouble." I wiped her eyes and said, "It's not you who caused trouble for me, it's others who caused trouble for us." I walked over angrily, slammed the yellow helmet in my hand onto the table, and yelled at the counselor, "How can you be a teacher? They locked my sister out of the dormitory and you didn't punish them. They didn't do it on purpose, and they didn't hear it." The counselor tried to smooth things over, his voice getting lower and lower. The 3 girls were startled and they gathered together pointing at me. This is a bitch. The quality of people at the bottom is low. It's so scary. I've never met someone like this in my life. They are all city people, all polite. I am from the country, I am a shrew. I don't care about anything else, I just don't want my sister to be bullied. I said, "I don't care. I sent my sister here safely. You locked her up outside and you must give me an explanation today." The counselor tried to persuade me and smooth things over, but I just wouldn't let her go. Finally, the little white bear girl who was the leader got angry. She came to me angrily and said, "It takes 2 to tango. Why don't we like Kathleen? Isn't it her own fault? My sister is an honest girl. When she was little, she would cry for 3 days if the chicken she raised died. What could she do wrong?" I got angry instantly and slapped the little white bear girl in the face. I didn't expect that. It was this slap in the face that ruined the rest of my and my sister's life. The girl was crying and making a fuss, but I ignored her. I pressured the counselor to change my sister's dormitory. The counselor changed my sister's dormitory, and I gave her a few more instructions. After I got home, I found that there was a lot of blood on my knee, which was all stuck to my pants. The wound on my knee was stuck to my pants, and when I tore them off, the pain made my teeth chatter. I just found some alcohol, applied some medicine and fell asleep. In the middle of the night, I was awakened by a loud knock on the door. I live in an urban village where I earn 300 yuan a month. The landlord's family lives across the street, and I thought it was the landlord who came to find me. When I opened the door, 3 men appeared in front of me. They quickly covered my mouth and controlled me. I smelled something very similar to medicinal alcohol, and then my vision went dark. When I woke up, I was in a dirty warehouse, surrounded by dusty machines and debris. There was a man sitting in front of me, his legs crossed, his collar open, his chest exposed, his eyebrows raised high, his left eyebrow broken a little. "Cindy, you hit my girlfriend. Do you know who I am?" At that time I didn't know who he was, so I said stubbornly, "I hit you, so what? Are you going to hit me back?" I didn't expect that he was Henry, the richest and most powerful young man in the entire mall. He doesn't really like his girlfriend, he just suddenly wants to play a trick on her. And that person, unfortunately, is me. That day he asked me, "Which hand hit the bear?" Before I could say anything, his pair of leather shoes suddenly stepped on my palm and I screamed in pain. He was smoking a cigarette and looking at me with raised eyebrows as if he was looking at the scenery, but one of his feet was crushing my hand mercilessly. I trembled in pain, but was stubborn and refused to beg for mercy. Interesting, isn't it? He looked at me, gritting my teeth and sweating, and he casually pressed the cigarette butt on my forehead. With a hiss, I felt as if a hole was burned in my forehead. The pain was so severe that I wanted to roll on the ground. "You are quite courageous. I wonder if your sister can be as courageous as you." He mentioned my sister and I instantly got scared. My sister is afraid of pain, but I am not. I can't let my sister suffer. It's all my fault. Why should I hit her? I knelt on the ground tremblingly and kowtowed hard. "Brother, it's my fault. I apologize to you. Don't blame my sister. It's all my fault." I spoke tremblingly, my head banging against the ground repeatedly. My head was buzzing, but I only had one thought. I want to protect my sister. Okay, I won't look for your sister, but I'm not completely venting my anger yet. The man pulled me up and looked at me with a sly smile. "If you hold on until the end without crying, I will let your sister go." He clapped his hands and 3 men surrounded me. I forgot how I survived that day. I remember crying. I remember writhing on the ground like a fish on a chopping block. I remember being beaten and my nose bled a lot. I could smell the blood at first, but later I couldn't smell it anymore. They beat women so cruelly. My hands were crushed by leather shoes, but I didn't cry. I didn't cry even when my hair was pulled and I was slapped. I didn't cry even though I twisted my arms back as hard as I could. Henry was getting tired of watching this. He said, "This is boring, don't cry. Bring her sister over to deal with it together." Instantly I burst into tears. Tears mixed with blood and mud fell to the ground. I hugged Henry's thighs and said, "I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please let my sister go." I don't usually meet people like Henry. His family has a complicated network of relationships, and he is the one who has the final say in Chongqing. He wants to play with me and no one can save me. It's not that I didn't think about calling the police. Just as I was wandering around the police station, Henry took a photo of my sister and sent it to me. He grabbed my neck and said, "When I get tired of playing with you, I will let you go. Rich people have many tricks." He had this new gadget and couldn't wait to show it off to others. At first I was not convinced and didn't listen to him, so he tortured me to death. He held me in the pool for 5 minutes, locked me in a dog cage and starved me for 3 days and then throw a chicken at me. Do you think I can stand firm without fear of power? What a pity, I'm not that strong and great. I have learned to give in. Only by surrendering can you avoid being tortured to death. I had already done something as shameless as disguising myself on the ground when I graduated from high school and handed out flyers asking people to leave their phone numbers. Henry stopped torturing me when he saw that I had surrendered. I managed to hold it in several times. Every night I looked out the window at the stars and calculated when I would die. As long as you can support my sister and let her finish college, I will die. What's the point of my living? Because Henry controls me, I can't make money by delivering food, and I don't want my sister to know my current situation, so I shamelessly beg Henry to give me some money. I remember Henry's sarcastic look that day very clearly. He pinched my face with his lips curled and said, "Do you know how to ask me for something? If you want something, you have to pay for it." He drank too much that day and his ears were red. I was trembling as I pinched his shirt buttons. He threw me to the ground and called me dirty. I didn't give up and hugged his thighs again with tears in my eyes. I know how cheap I look now, but I have no choice. I have to give money to my sister. I know I am quite pretty, and many people wanted to keep me when I was working. Henry couldn't resist my beauty. I don't know how I got through that night. Henry pushed me into the bathtub and scrubbed me hard with a brush. After that day, Henry got the hang of it and I no longer had to sleep in a cage in his room. That was where the Tibetan Mastiff he used to raise slept. He let me sleep in his bed and held me tight at night. He combed my hair like he was combing a dog and bought me beautiful clothes to dress me up. He said, "You really look like the Tibetan Mastiff I met when I was a child." Yes, my Tibetan Mastiff looked at me like this with wet eyes. When it was a child, it was raised together with a local dog by someone who didn't know the value of it. I loved that Tibetan Mastiff, and I hit it hard with a stick, trying to tame it and make it protect me. That Tibetan Mastiff really looks like you. I beat it so hard that its fur was covered in blood, but it still tried to protect the local dog. I didn't say anything. Henry held my face and asked me, "Tell me, you followed me to suffer for your sister. This is such a great love. Just like that stupid dog." Henry likes listening to me and my sister talking on the phone the most. Henry says my tone is so gentle that water could drip out of it. He said, "Cindy, say something like that to me too. I want to hear it." Under pressure, I had to say a few words awkwardly. Henry didn't feel awkward, he really enjoyed it. He said, "Cindy, please treat me as well as you treat your sister. I need someone who is sincere and true to me." I hid it very well. No one knows what Henry did to me and how I lost my dignity. One moment I was being pulled by Henry for fun. The next I was making a video call to my sister with a smile on my face. I asked my sister how she was doing. My sister said that she was doing well and that everyone in the dormitory was very nice to her. And she told me not to worry. I believe it, I really believe it. Later, when my sister jumped off the building, I realized that the little white bear girl did not let my sister go. She said she lost her money and spread rumors that her sister was a thief. I found a wad of money under my sister's bed in her old dormitory. All the girls in the class isolated my sister. All the girls in the class. No one talked to my sister. Before class, the books she put in the first row would be thrown to the back, and no one would team up with her for group assignments. My sister insisted on doing it every day. She didn't want to tell me and she didn't want to cause me trouble. Because I told her before, "We no longer have parents, so we can't get into trouble. No one will clean up our messes for us." My sister listens to me and she likes me the most. Then, Little White Bear sent the video of my humiliation to my sister. The little white bear said, "Look, Kathleen, this is your sister. Your sister is A." She pursed her lips and said one word. That was the first time my sister lost her temper. She fought with the little white bear like crazy. Little White Bear said, "Henry said your sister has a very stubborn temper, but she softens when your name is mentioned." My sister, such a smart child, understood it instantly. She jumped from the 16th floor. The 16th floor. I remember my sister once pointed at the tall building and said to me, "Sister, I will take you to live in a tall building in the future." I hugged her and said, "Then I'm counting on you." She jumped without any hesitation and sent me a text message before jumping. She said, "Sister, I can't hold you back any longer." I went crazy when I got the news. At that time, the school said that my sister suffered from depression and easily brushed the matter aside. I knelt at the school gate and held up a white banner. Henry took me away and said, "Don't leave me alone outside." At that time, Henry didn't take it seriously. He said, "Your sister is dead, so just focus on being nice to me." I was furious, and the first time I rushed over, I bit Henry hard. Henry felt the pain and kicked me aside. I lay on the ground and cried loudly. Henry was afraid that I was going crazy, so he came over to comfort me and said, "The dead cannot be resurrected. You have to look forward." In order to calm me down when I was going crazy, Henry helped me investigate this matter. It was the little white bear who did it. Henry sent my video to Little White Bear as a trophy, so Little White Bear could show the video to my sister. Henry found someone to hold down the little white bear. But is it useful? The sister who would share even a small piece of chicken chop with me. The sister who didn't want to cause trouble to me, so she didn't buy a computer even though she was a computer major, but went to the library to use the computer. The sister who lied to me that she was going to stay in school to study during the summer vacation but was actually working a summer job. She is dead. After my sister died, I had a high fever. Henry found a private doctor to give me an injection. He held me, who was burning hot, and said, "Cindy, I won't let you die. You have to stay with me." I didn't want to take the medicine, so I secretly hid the pills in my palm and threw them under the bed. I hate this world, I hate Henry, and I hate those rich people who bully others at will. When I wanted to die, Henry asked me, "Don't you want revenge?" His broken eyebrows were knitted tightly, and he said, "Aren't you quite strong-willed? Your sister is dead, don't you want revenge?" Henry's words pulled me back. Revenge, revenge. My sister was killed by 3 people. The first person is the little white bear. Henry wiped the tears from my face and said, "Cindy, follow me. I will help you get revenge. I don't know when it started, but Henry stopped calling me dog or scolding me. He called me Cindy. He asked me to follow him. Henry's words were not a question. To him, he never cared about my answer. He could do whatever he wanted. Henry said, "Cindy, from now on, you have to treat me like your sister." He held my head and kept emphasizing this to me. The weight of the word family. Henry has no family, and he has known since he was a child that he has many older brothers. Only the child who looks most like his father can be taken home and become the official son of the Lewis family. Henry's mother was very strict. If Henry walked in an incorrect posture, he would be locked in a small dark room and punished. Your father wouldn't walk that fast. If you walk too fast, you will be hit on your calves with a stick. When it hurts, you will know to change. Henry had many dogs, and when he was very young, he would instruct those dogs to bite his other brothers. But when those brothers tried to kill him, the dogs, which were supposed to be loyal, scattered and ran away, failing to protect him. The mother who grew up with him jumped out of the window and escaped, complaining as she left. If I had known it was so useless, I wouldn't have wasted my time. After the attack that night, Henry survived and was taken back to the Lewis family home. He became the only heir of the Lewis family, and after Henry's father died of a heart attack, he became the head of the Lewis family. Henry's favorite Tibetan Mastiff was not tamed by Henry in the end. After Henry killed the Tibetan Mastiff, he stopped raising dogs. Henry said, "It's a good dog, but it's a pity that it didn't choose me." After he finished speaking, he looked at me dangerously and asked, "Cindy, what do you think?" Henry was a man of action. He took the little white bear to the warehouse I had been to before. The people who kidnapped the little white bear were not the 3 people who kidnapped me. I asked Henry where the 3 people were. Henry said with a grim look, "They were sent away." I know Henry has dirty hands. The little white bear was covered in dirt. His long nails, which were painted with pink nail polish, had long been broken and were covered in blood. It was obvious that he had been tortured. The little white bear cried miserably and kept begging for mercy. She called Henry's name, hoping that Henry would not be so cruel to her because of their past relationship. Henry acted as if he didn't hear it and let the men do it. I then realized that they have so many ways to torture people. They put the person in a sack and hung him up, then hit the sack with boxing gloves. At first, you could hear screams from inside the sack, but then there was no sound. Both of my hands were shaking uncontrollably. Henry held a cigarette in his mouth and said, "Do you want to hit me twice?" I shook my head, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. I was so scared. Little White Bear is not a lower-class person like me. Her family has some money, but she is just a rich and beautiful girl. Henry can do whatever he wants, and the power behind him is unfathomable. Chongqing is close to the border but far from the center, and the Lewis family is the local tyrant. Henry saw me crying out of fear. He hugged me and laughed. "Look how scared you are. Cindy is just timid. To be my woman, you have to be braver." That night, I had nightmares all night long. I deeply realized one thing: Henry is not a human being. Can I beat such a person? Henry did it on purpose. He took me to see the little white bear on purpose, to scare me on purpose, and to use threats to maintain the relationship between him and me. I need to stay calm. I need to stay cool. Although Henry and I have been together for almost a year, he only started to treat me nicely recently. I know he has dirty hands, but I have no evidence, and now is definitely not a good time for me to confront him. There is only one word: wait. I must lurk beside him like a harmless little animal, letting him caress my soft belly at any time, and then bite him when he isn't paying attention. Only one chance: kill with one strike. After the little polar bear disappeared, the police looked for it several times. Little White Bear's parents had made a fuss several times, and the final result was that Little White Bear fell in love online and went abroad, where he was kidnapped.
No andou denhi.
Many people died in Chongqing. All of them died while trying to sneak across the border. I have been with Henry for 2 years since Little White Bear died. For 2 whole years, I was the only woman with Henry. Henry was very controlling and possessive. After I followed him, I hardly ever spoke to any man other than him. Then he erased everything from 3 years ago. Henry destroyed the families of those who had watched my performance and laughed at me. Once there was a woman who was jealous of me and came to me and talked about things in the past. Before I could even frown, the woman was immediately covered with her mouth and dragged out. In the whole Chongqing, no one dared to look down on me. They even gave me jewelry and begged me to say good things to Henry. In the second year of my relationship with Henry, Henry took me to an island in his private plane, and we spent a full 6 months there. Those 6 months were wonderful for Henry. During the day, he taught me in the villa. He seemed to want to raise me to be the person he loved the most, and he taught me to read. I was a poor student since I was young, my memory was not very good, and my sense of logic was not very strong, so Henry taught me management and finance. I didn't understand. It felt like I was listening to something foreign. I was crying. Henry smiled happily and said, "If you can memorize some of it, I'll reward you." Henry's reward is to kiss me, hug me and touch me. Is this a reward for me or for him? I vomited, but I still had to recite it with all my strength. When Henry was in a meeting, I fell asleep while he was carrying me on his back. When I woke up, Henry was drawing the word Wang on my forehead with a pen. When I opened my eyes, he was still a little embarrassed, his ears were red, and his eyes were a little evasive. I said, "What are you doing? You are just like those bad boys in school." Henry said in a bad tone, "I haven't been to school." Henry grew up with his mother and never went to school. All his knowledge came from a private tutor, who lived to inherit the Lewis family. The Lewis family is a dark cancer, huge and dirty. But money is an attractive thing, so people continue to join this underground kingdom. Henry arranged a full schedule for me. He also taught me how to shoot a gun and bought me a beautiful and exquisite pistol. Standing at the shooting range, he held my hand and told me to stay calm and look ahead. He half closed his eyes, his narrow eyes revealing his unbridled desire, and said, "Do you see the head of the dummy in front?" With a bang, Henry's shooting skills were very good, and the glass head of the dummy opposite him shattered immediately. I fired several times but missed. Henry said, "Cindy, you still have a lot to learn." I love learning how to shoot. I practice every day. At night, the wind on the island is cool, and the waves hit the rocks, splashing out white foam. It was a rare moment of peace and quiet for Henry and I. He took me to see the sea, picked up some random stones, and then hugged me tightly on the cold rocks. He seemed to want to rub me into his body. He called my name and kept saying, "Cindy, I'm your man." I learned how to shoot a gun, and at night when Henry was sleeping, I pointed the small pistol at Henry's forehead. I controlled my shallow breathing, but Henry suddenly opened his eyes. In the darkness, his eyes shone like gems with a fierce look. He suddenly grabbed the muzzle of my gun, and with a curled lip corner he said to me, "I can't die. If I die, I can't be with you anymore." I said, "Henry, why don't you just die? I hate you." I pulled the trigger, but the bullet didn't go through his head. As expected, the little gun was just a tool Henry used to coax me. After each training session, all the bullets were collected. I once tried to hide them but was quickly discovered. This assassination attempt that was doomed to fail was my gamble, my bet on where Henry's bottom line was towards me. Henry sat up and hugged me, and I bit his shoulder so hard that I could even taste the blood. "Cindy, if I die, you will definitely marry someone else, and I can't stand it. If I die, I will take you with me. Even if I go to hell, you have to accompany me." Henry said this with a smile, but his eyes were unquestionably firm, and he bit my finger hard. "You are an ungrateful idiot." The next year, I learned Henry's secret. Henry had multiple identities. He had discussed projects with others using various identities such as Raymond and Albert. He was in cahoots with the bosses at the border. The border has been unstable recently. Henry went out more often and more people died in Chongqing, and the higher-ups noticed it. There's a new policeman in Chongqing. Henry invited him to dinner. Henry smiled gently and said, "You look quite young. Why don't you go to a big city but come to this remote place?" The new policeman's name is Peter Moore. Peter was intimidated by Henry's superior aura. He flinched a little, his shoulders hunched, and his tone unconsciously lowered. "Peter, there are few people taking the exam here, so I came here to take the exam." I looked at Peter a few more times and he looked like he was scared to death. Henry held the jade ring and said, "Chongqing is a place with beautiful scenery and simple folk customs. It's nice to come here." Henry said this with a smile as he pushed over a few pieces of jade. Shangqing is a place rich in jade. You can take these little things to Yujiayuan to have a look. These pieces of jade are indeed not valuable, but if they are sent to Yujiayuan, each piece can be exchanged for 300,000. Peter took a quick look. He didn't dare touch the jade pieces, not even to look at them for a few more seconds. Henry laughed loudly. He was used to it. No one in Shangqing was not afraid of him. I said nothing and played with the tassels of my skirt with an indifferent look on my face. Henry doesn't give me a cell phone and he doesn't let me play with it. Henry became unhappy when he saw me playing by myself, and he held my hand tightly under the table. Peter dropped his chopsticks and he was picking them up when he saw me. I was a little annoyed and pinched Henry's palm. Henry, on the other hand, was all smiles. After dinner, Henry drank some wine. He pushed me into the car and looked at me with his dark eyes. Like a cat ready to hunt in the dark. You've seen him 13 times. What? Do you think I'm too old and like to see younger people? Henry is not very old, except that he has a broken eyebrow and a devilish look, so he looks like he is in his 30s, but he is actually only 28. I said, no. Henry cursed in a sour tone. What a useless coward. He didn't even dare to breathe a single word when I spoke. Is it worth watching? As he said this, he held me down forcefully, kissed my forehead and said, tonight I will punish you by making you look at me all the time. I don't have a good impression of Peter. One reason was that he looked cowardly and docile, just like the dogs around Henry. Secondly, because I looked at him a few times, Henry punished me by making me keep looking at him, which made me feel sick. But I bumped into Peter a few times, and when Peter saw me, he lowered his head, was so scared, and hurriedly avoided me. He knew that I was Henry's woman, he was afraid of Henry, and was afraid of making me unhappy, and when he saw me, he wanted to hide in the ground. When he saw Henry, he served him tea and water. He nodded in agreement to everything Henry said. He didn't have the dignity of a police officer at all. He was more like a frightened quail. When he met Henry, he bowed his head and made me feel annoyed. Henry was very happy when he knew I didn't like it. He couldn't hide his smile and said, not all men are like you. In the 3rd year of my relationship with Henry, Henry was holding my feet and concentrating on painting my nails. He restrained his anger, lowered his brows and smiled, and even showed a bit of gentleness. Henry touched the calluses on the soles of my feet and said impatiently, it's been 3 years and they haven't recovered yet. I kicked him lightly, but he didn't get angry. Henry was painting my nails and he said casually, I'm going to give you some property. Tomorrow you follow me into the study to sign some contracts. I was a little dazed and Henry saw my dazed look. He curled his lips and smiled, with his broken eyebrows raised high. What's wrong? I'm so happy I can't speak. It's not that I was so happy that I couldn't speak, but I finally had the chance to go to the study. Henry always receives his boss in the study, so the evidence of his collusion with his boss should be in the study. After following Henry into the study, I carefully looked around the layout of the study. There was a safe in Henry's study. He opened the safe and took out a number of contracts, which were proof of his assets. Henry saw that my eyes were fixed on the safe, and he raised his eyebrows. You never thought I was so rich. He handed me a few documents and said, pick from here. I'll give you whatever you like. I want them all. I said, looking at Henry. I thought Henry would frown, but he pinched my face lovingly and said, little money grubber. Then he handed me the pen and asked me to sign it. In the middle of signing, Henry received a phone call and walked out of the study. Henry went out before the safe was closed. The room suddenly became very quiet and I could almost hear myself swallowing. The classical clock hanging on the wall made a ding-dong sound. This is a trap. How could Henry put something so important in front of me like this? He always knew that I hated him. But there is only one chance. If I can get the evidence, I can find a way to send it to the police. What to do? Turn it over or not? That safe was like the devil's treasure tempting me. I know Henry, he's too smart for me to touch. I suppressed my desire and looked towards the open safe. The second layer of the safe also contained some folders and some jewelry. The third layer was a little strange, it was a red velvet box. Just as I was trying to see clearly what the third floor was, Henry's voice exploded in my ears. His voice was so low that no emotion could be heard. Cindy. I pretended to be casual and said, Your safe is open, what's on the third layer? Henry smiled and opened the third layer of the safe in front of me. Only when the red velvet box was taken out could I see it clearly. Inside the exquisite box is a rose made of a napkin. I remember that rose. It was in the second year between Henry and I. He took me to dinner at the Sea Hotel for my birthday, and kept asking me for a birthday present. I didn't have a good impression of him and was filled with disgust, so I picked up a napkin from the table, folded it into a rose and threw it to him. He was not angry. Instead, he played with it for a while and then carefully put it into his suit pocket. I heard a gurgling sound in my throat, and I said, "You still have it. This is the first gift you gave me." Henry sighed. Although there was some dissatisfaction on his face, he still took the paper flower and put it in the box. I said casually, "I'll give it to you later." "There's no need." Henry's eyes suddenly lit up after he said this casually, and those eyes that usually held a fierce look were now filled with joy and surprise. He said, "Cindy, you said that you would do it in the future, so don't regret it." After I said this, I regretted it. I just said it casually. Henry was very happy. He held me tightly and said, "Cindy, we still have a future." Then Henry told me, "Cindy, you are pregnant."
Ia e mapregnan.
This is the most disgusting and infuriating thing in the world to me. The person who killed my sister is right in front of me. My nerves are on edge every day. I force myself to smile and stay by his side, trying to collect evidence to bring him down. And then he told me I was pregnant? I want to give birth to a child for an enemy, a devil who kills people without mercy. This kid completely disrupted my plans. I want to collect evidence to bring him down, and I don't want to be a burden. I remembered the birth control pills I had taken secretly. Henry had replaced my pills. Henry had lied to me. I want to vomit, I feel nauseous. I became depressed, I refused to eat, I hid in the house, and I ignored Henry when he talked to me. The more submissive I was before, the more resistant I am now. I said, "Whatever, Henry, you can put me in a water tank, lock me in a cage, scold me and beat me, it doesn't matter, I can't have your child." Henry's eyes were as cold as stars. He gritted his teeth and said, "Cindy, you are not a human being if you turn your face against me. You have to give birth to the baby even if you don't want to. This is the fruit of our love. Do I love you?" I turned around in bed, my back facing Henry, and I didn't even look at him. Henry started throwing things behind my back. He broke all the high-end vases and decorations in my house. He was the one who sent it here with great eagerness, and now it falls again. There is something wrong with him. I just don't want to eat. When he feeds me, I spit on the ground. I looked at Henry with hatred in my eyes. Finally, Henry was mad at me and said, "Cindy, what do you want?" I said, "Henry, why are you panicking? I was locked in a cage and starved for 3 days before, and I was fine." Henry stood in front of me with his back straight. He was 1.9 meters tall, and his shadow almost covered me. He gritted his teeth and said, "Cindy, I'll kneel down for you. Can you eat a bite of food? Don't you know you're pregnant?" I know my body very well, but there is nothing I can do. I have no love for this child. The arrival of this child was forced by his father. Henry controls everything about me and I have no way to prevent pregnancy. I said, "Then kneel down." Henry knelt down immediately with a thump. A 1.9 meter tall man kneeling on the ground looked like a bear, which was ridiculous. He knelt down and held up the porridge and said, "Cindy, you are not a fucking human being. Do you want to eat it or not?" I ate it. The depression game was just the beginning. The real gift came at our wedding. Henry is such a ridiculous person. He ignored the law and still wanted to have a legally recognized marriage with me. He didn't need to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. He just asked someone to stamp our marriage. Henry never dreamed of this. I hid that video for 3 years and saved it from my sister's mobile phone. He destroyed all of them, but he didn't expect that I, the victim, still had some in my hands. Henry had been planning for the wedding for a long time, and he specially went to France to order the diamond ring and wedding dress for me. He was so excited that he even wanted to play the trick of picking up the bride. He dropped me off at another villa and picked me up in a luxury car. He made it such a grand event and announced me as his wife in front of everyone in Chongqing. I played this video at my wedding. All the audience was silent, but I was laughing on the wedding stage. Henry smashed all the screens at the wedding, And in his anger, he even wanted to shoot and kill the person who played the video. The wedding was a complete and utter failure. Henry, wearing a suit and with red eyes, asked me, "Can't we just start over?" I pointed at the video and asked with a smile, "What do you think?" Henry's eyes were red uncontrollably and he asked me, "What should I do?" Then Henry slowly squatted down, covering his face, growling like a wild animal, tears streaming through his fingers. At this moment, he no longer looked like the cold and cruel Henry, but more like a boy who had collapsed after losing his loved one. At this moment, Henry lost his dignity. Henry made a big joke in Chongqing, although no one dared to laugh at him in person. I ignored Henry, and he thought of many ways. He gave me a card so that I could buy jewelry and clothes. I didn't want to go at first, but I thought it would be a waste if I didn't spend his money, so I would cheat him as much as I could. Henry and I were in a cold war. If I went out to buy jewelry by myself, Henry would definitely hire bodyguards to keep an eye on me. I was familiar with those faces. Henry was afraid that I would be angry, so he asked Peter to keep an eye on me. Peter was supposed to be sitting in the office helping people with household registration, but he didn't dare to refuse Henry, so he had to follow me timidly, fearing that I would discover him. I still found him. I was angry, so I called him over and said, "Henry asked you to follow me, right? Then don't hide anymore. Follow me and buy with me." I just wanted to piss Henry off on purpose. The more Henry forbade me to get close to other men, the closer I got. Peter hung his head, not daring to say anything. I handed him the receipt and said, "Go ahead and swipe your card." Peter took the ticket and swiped the card. He hurriedly swiped the card and ran back to show me the ticket. I didn't like the people around Henry, so I took the ticket casually but was suddenly stunned. There was a piece of paper lightly attached to the back of the receipt. It said, "I know you hate Henry too, please help me." I suddenly looked up at Peter. Peter still had a cowardly and honest expression on his face, but his eyes were surprisingly bright. Looking at those eyes, I carefully crumpled up the paper and stuffed it into my sleeve, then nodded gently without making any expression. Henry's bodyguards were waiting for me outside the store. I said, "Peter, I just want to buy some clothes for Henry. You two have similar body shapes. Why don't you try them on and let me see if they work for you?" Peter nodded. After he walked into the fitting room, I walked towards the toilet and then took advantage of the blind spot to get into the fitting room. In the small fitting room, I could hear Peter's soothing breathing. I lowered my voice and asked, "What happened to your note? I attended your wedding with Henry, and only then did I know that you and I were in the same group. I'm an undercover policeman, and we've investigated Henry's collusion with the boss, but we don't have any evidence. I need evidence to arrest him." Peter cut to the chase, his timid look gone, replaced by determination and calmness. "I think the same as you. I want to kill Henry all the time. What do you need me to help you with?" I asked. Peter asked me, "According to my research, Henry will have an important deal in a week. Can you go with him?" Peter was very embarrassed to say this. He knew Henry liked me, but he couldn't guarantee that Henry would take me with him. Henry's guard was high. There is no way to arrest Henry without evidence. I have to find a way to get to the trading site. It was not a good idea to continue arguing with Henry like this, so I had to give in. I asked Peter to buy me 2 bottles of wine and put some drugs that make people unconscious in the wine. Henry has a very good alcohol tolerance and usually can't get drunk. When Henry came back in the evening, I waited for him on the sofa. Henry came in carefully, not wanting to disturb me. He was startled when he saw me and asked, "Why don't you go to bed?" I frowned and said, "Why are you back so late?" I said with a tone of impatience and anger. Peter said that when a man is in a cold war, he will easily go out and find another woman for comfort. Did you go there too? I stood up and grabbed his tie, saying in a very unfriendly tone, "Henry, you ruined me and you're going to find another woman?" Henry was a little stunned by my accusation, but he understood what I meant in an instant. He was not angry but happy. He held my hand and said, "Cindy, you have no conscience. Who else can I have but you?" I twisted in his arms and said angrily, "How should I know? You are Henry." I sniffed his scent and said, "The smell of cheating." When Henry saw my kitten-like movements, he immediately burst out laughing. He hugged me and said, "Cindy, you are jealous. I love you so much." I ignored him, picked up the wine on the table and was about to drink it, as if I was trying to drown my sorrows in alcohol. Henry stretched out his long arms and snatched my glass. He frowned and said, "You are pregnant. Don't drink." As he said this, he drank the wine on the table in one gulp. I reached out my hand to grab it again, but Henry teased me on purpose and held the wine glass in his mouth and refused to give it to me. I pretended to be angry, picked up the bottle of wine on the table and poured it directly into my mouth. Henry's expression changed instantly. His face darkened and he was about to pry my mouth open, but I immediately kissed Henry. Henry took all the drinks. From such a close distance, I could almost see the fine hairs on Henry's face. His pupils were dilated like a dazed snake. Henry called me a little bastard and held me tightly. I very enthusiastically let Henry carry me back to the room. After this, Henry and I reconciled and we returned to our former close relationship. I started to act jealous and suspicious. Henry surprisingly liked it. 2 days later, I suddenly had a stomachache when I was going down the stairs and fell down. I hurriedly grabbed something and scratched my arm and had to get 3 stitches. Peter took me to the hospital, and Henry's heart broke when he saw me. He said angrily, "I'm going to blow up that staircase. And how are those bodyguards guarding it?" I said, "It's all your fault. My stomach suddenly hurts. It must be because of you 2 days ago." Henry felt a little guilty. He rubbed my belly and said carefully, "I'm sorry." Henry tortured me like this during the first 3 months of my pregnancy. Henry asked the doctor, and the doctor almost scolded Henry to death. "How can you be a husband? Don't you know that you can't have sex in the first 3 months?" Fortunately, the pregnant woman is fine this time. If someone else had scolded Henry like this, he would probably have shot himself. But this time, Henry meekly lowered his head and admitted his mistake, like an elementary school student who had made a mistake. Henry made a mistake and he felt guilty. So when he told me he was going to be out for a while, I pretended to be angry and said, "I want to go with you." Henry looked troubled and I held him tightly. "I'm pregnant. How do I know if you'll take advantage of this time to cheat on me? We are husband and wife now. If there is something I can't go." "I'm Mrs. Lewis," I said, looking up. The word Mrs. Lewis made Henry very happy. He took me to the scene where the boss was trading. He was a little wary when he went there and he confiscated my phone. But he didn't know that the undercover police officer next to him gave me a bug and hid it in my brooch. The red rose brooch was given to me by Henry. He spent a huge amount of money to have it custom-made in France. He would never have imagined that the gift he gave me to curry my favor would be the weapon to bring him down. When the bosses saw me, their expressions froze, showing dissatisfaction, and some of them were ready to take action. Henry glared and everyone around him pulled out their guns. Henry's face was stern and his voice was resounding. "This is my wife, Henry. If you recognize me, you must recognize her. If you recognize me, you must recognize her." After hearing this, the bosses calmed down and started to follow the procedures normally. I also pretended to be considerate and dependent and leaned against Henry. I yawned halfway through the conversation and called out Henry on purpose. Henry leaned forward slightly, lowered his voice and approached me and said, "Cindy, it's almost over. I didn't let you come because I was afraid you would be bored." I hummed, playing with Henry's fingers intentionally or unintentionally. Henry's face didn't show it, but his ears were red. He is obviously a murderer, but at this moment he acts like a young boy. All the conversations are recorded in my brooch. After I got back, I threw the brooch away. Peter would find a way to get it. The evidence collection is completed, and the arrest operation begins. Henry has been entrenched in Chongqing for many years and has done many evil things, and finally he got his retribution. At night, I was awakened by a violent shaking. I opened my eyes and saw Henry holding me up. He didn't look panicked, he just held the gun and said in an unquestionable tone, "Cindy, follow me." Before I could say anything, he grabbed my wrist with one hand and pointed a gun with the other hand, demanding that I follow him. I know the police are here to arrest Henry. It's obvious that Henry has a backup plan. I can't let him get away. Henry quickly put on my shoes, then held my hand and ran to the study. He ran to the study and opened the safe. I thought he was going to take out the jewelry or something, but he stuffed the paper rose into his breast pocket. Then he ran towards the garage with the gun in one hand and holding my hand tightly with the other. The SUV in the garage is brand new, and its windows are made of bulletproof glass. The moment I got into the car, the sound of bombing came from behind. I turned around and saw a loud explosion inside the villa where we lived. Self-destruct system, Henry explained. We sat in the off-road vehicle, and Henry turned the steering wheel and drove towards the jungle village 5 kilometers away. In the dim car, the only sound was his rapid breathing. Cars can't drive into the forest. Henry opened the car door and helped me get out of the car. I looked up and saw a huge jungle. This place is close to the tropics. The trees are tall and block out the sun. Henry pulled me through the jungle. He held the gun and said, "If we go any further, we will reach the border. Let's flee the country." Henry didn't ask himself why he was arrested by the police. He seemed to understand everything. He glanced at me with bitterness in his eyes. "I am now a wanted criminal in the country. Cindy, you stay with me and you have to compensate me." It was extremely hot in the jungle, and the road was covered with branches, roots, and accumulated mud, making it difficult to walk on. I was in poor health and I was out of breath after walking a few steps. I sat on the ground and stopped moving, but Henry carried me on his back. His thick shoulders carried me, every step he took was heavy, and his shoes crunched on the branches on the ground. I leaned on Henry's back and asked, "Henry, how long will it take us to get there?" Henry said, "I'll carry you on my back for 2 days. It won't be tiring." Henry carried me on his back all night, and at night he took out a piece of chocolate and put it in my hand. It was just a piece of chocolate that I casually put in his pocket yesterday. I asked Henry, "What do you eat?" Henry wiped the sweat from his forehead and said, "I'm not hungry." Henry's lips were dry and even bloodshot due to lack of water and food for a long time. Under the moonlight, he did not complain at all, but his resolute face showed a little tenderness. I calculated when the police would find me, and I began to feel anxious. Does Henry really want to escape? A bird seemed to be startled and suddenly spread its wings and flew away. The noisy bird singing suddenly exploded in my ears. There were hurried footsteps in the distance. Henry's face changed. He suddenly picked me up and ran away quickly. The police found us. With a bang. The sound of the gunshot suddenly woke me up. Henry quickly protected me. His shoulder tilted and he was hit by a bullet in the right shoulder. Several beams of flashlight suddenly shot towards us. I couldn't open my eyes for a moment, and Henry protected my eyes with his intact hand. I squinted my eyes and saw Henry forced a smile. What kind of smile was that? Desperate, cold, and sinister. "I underestimated you, Peter. I thought you were a wimp." Peter walked over in leather boots, holding a gun pointed at Henry's head. "You underestimate justice." Peter held the pistol, his face firm and his eyes calm. A smell of blood rushed into my nose. Blood continued to seep out of Henry's shoulder through his clothes, and then flowed down, instantly dyeing the paper rose on his chest a charming and sad red. Henry still won't let go of my hand. Peter motioned me over, and Henry's dark eyes stared at me motionlessly. He didn't look surprised, nor did he show anger of betrayal. He didn't yell at me. Instead, he looked at me calmly. He asked me softly, "Now you have succeeded in your revenge." Before I could say anything, Henry asked me again, "Have you ever loved me?" He pursed his lips tightly, as if he was expecting my answer, but also as if he knew the answer.
Primevit malasialip.
Henry didn't wait for my answer. He smiled bitterly, as if he already knew the answer. He seemed to relax, and his shoulders, which had been tense, relaxed a little. Henry raised his left hand suddenly. He didn't know when he had switched the pistol in his right hand to his left hand. I remember Henry was a very good shooter, skilled with both hands. I immediately tried to dodge and grab Henry's gun, but Henry suddenly pointed it at my forehead. Henry's lips trembled, his face was filled with despair. "Cindy, I'll kill you first, will you die with me?" I calmed down and didn't move, and I said, "Okay. Henry won't kill me." He was at the end of his life and he pointed a gun at me, trying to make me say no like I used to. "Cindy, will you marry me?" Not good. "Cindy, can we live together from now on?" Not good. "Cindy, please don't die, okay?" Henry didn't want to hear the word yes this time. Henry wouldn't let me die. because he knew I had never gotten over my sister's incident. My first target of revenge was the little white bear, my second was him, and my third was myself. I had long been determined to die. He wanted me to live well, and wanted me to promise that I would not commit suicide after he died. I just don't do what he wants. As soon as I finished speaking, Henry took a deep breath and his tone was stern and tough. Cindy, don't die. If you die, I will haunt you in hell. After saying that, Henry suddenly pushed me to the opposite side of Peter. Peter's arms caught me. I stood next to Peter and looked at Henry, who was sitting under the tree opposite. He was bleeding a lot and his face was pale like a trapped animal, but his handsome broken eyebrows were still tightly twisted. He raised the gun towards me and yelled, "Cindy, close your eyes. Peter, cover her eyes." Before I could say anything, Peter's hand suddenly covered my eyes. In the darkness, I heard a bang. Then Peter covered my eyes and asked me to turn around. I heard a commotion and someone whispered, "Henry is dead." I forced a smile and Peter put his hand on my shoulder. He said, "Cindy, you are crying. Over."